thank you so much again for joining me on this channel. As always, I'm very grateful for all your previous views, likes and subscriptions. I thought today we'd spend some time investigating Pentecost, an important moment in the Christian tradition. And it's important because for Christians, it's viewed as the birthday of the church, the moment where the church really starts to come alive. And for all the churches around the world, it's seen as the moment where they really need to start spreading the teachings of Jesus. Interestingly enough, in many countries, Germany for example, Pentecost is a 2-day holiday, and it was a nice reminder of how one of the reasons why I love studying religions is finding out all the festivals and all the celebrations that people can have with their friends and loved ones. So the birthday of the church, and as I normally do, and I've explained on this channel previously, I went to Google, used its define feature, and one of the things that's really interesting is how it's celebrated the 7th Sunday after Easter. If you remember, Easter is a lunar event, okay, it's dictated by the cycle of the moon, and Pentecost means 50th day. So digging a bit deeper, I wanted to find out why this was the case, and what really surprised me was how it has its roots in the Jewish festival of Shavuot or Shavuot. Okay, you know me by now, my pronunciation is woeful, and it was a harvest festival in the early spring, just to celebrate that first that first harvest. That's what it was about, and a chance just to give thanks to Yahweh for the food. And then later on, it also evolved into a moment to recognise the commandments, the 10 commandments given to Moses on the top of Mount Sinai, all those laws. And I think what's really fascinating is this, and something just to bear in mind, just the first thing you might want to play around with is how those early Christians, many of them were Jewish. Jesus himself was Jewish. We know he was presented to the temple as a baby, okay, to go through the Jewish rituals there of circumcision. He would have had a bar mitzvah. And even in the Gospels, it refers to Jesus going to the temple, the synagogue, as was his tradition. And it's an important reminder of the relationship between the New Testament and the Old Testament. Christians don't view the Old Testament as better or worse than the New Testament. Okay, they complete each other, they complement each other. But one thing we must be absolutely mindful of, as I'm always reminding myself, is that in the Jewish faith, the Old Testament is, of course, their entire holy book, the Tanakh. And I feel a little uncomfortable sometimes hearing this phrase, Judeo-Christian tradition. Yes, they certainly share lots of ideas and lots of moral values and so on, but they are two distinct faiths. And we've got to be careful not to infantilize, okay, the Old Testament and just see it as something which is not as important as the New Testament for Christians, or inferior. We must also remember, as in our studies, that the Old Testament is in itself a separate book for the Jewish faith, is the Tanakh. So just something to be aware of there. And I think the other thing that's really interesting as well is we need to put some context into the events of Pentecost, and that is Jesus has been resurrected. Okay, and remember, all his followers were just amazed and bowled over by this. For Christians, it's the moment where Jesus' resurrection is an important symbol of everlasting life, and sin has been conquered. Okay, the followers are really excited, and then Jesus ascends into heaven. We can find out about this in the book of Acts, which is about the actions of the early church. So Jesus ascends into heaven to be with God the Father, and we're about a week or so after this, and we're with the followers of Jesus. They're there in a little room praying and worshipping, and then what happens is this: the Holy Spirit descended like wind and fire. Okay, and we have this second thing I want to pick up on is how we have this idea of nature. Once again, the natural world is a way of God communicating with his followers, and the Holy Spirit is described as rather like a rush of wind, and also tongues of fire descend upon the disciples. Okay, and I think it's worth just having a little think about how Christians view God. They see God as expressing in three different ways: as the creator of the world, as the rescuer, as the redeemer of someone through Jesus who rescues people from their sins, and as the sustainer through the Holy Spirit. Think about how the Greek word for Holy Spirit is dynamos, so we get the word dynamite from, so power, explosion. Okay, and the Holy Spirit is described as Jesus as a wonderful counselor who is there to support, okay, the followers in that absence, or the physical absence, of Jesus. So we get this really powerful moment, but then it just gets absolutely brilliantly wild, because the followers kind of come out of the room, and people passing by thought they were drunk. And Peter told the crowd that they were just full of the Holy Spirit. Now, this blows my mind, because I'm trying to think exactly what the early followers of Jesus must have looked like or appeared to people if they looked drunk. And it's one of my favourite moments in religious traditions that I spend time looking at and investigating and teaching, because it must have just looked absolutely bonkers. Okay, that the overwhelming power of the Holy Spirit made them look drunk, and Peter is reassuring them, no, they're not drunk, it's just the power of God through the Holy Spirit. And I think today in churches, many Christians will talk about this third thing, which is being filled with the Holy Spirit. And it's a very, very, very broad expression. And as we know, Christianity is a broad church. See what I did there? And so for many Christians, it will mean different things. But they might just talk about how being filled with the Holy Spirit, and look at particular types of churches called Pentecostal churches, where the worship is really exuberant. There's might be singing and dancing. There might, for example, as well be just a great deal of open prayer and so on. But so this idea of a very kind of almost like party-like atmosphere can happen in some churches. But also, being filled with the Holy Spirit doesn't necessarily mean, of course, you have this kind of wild, ecstatic moments of joy. And one of the things that is talked about a bit later on in the New Testament, Paul, who I did a little video on earlier on this channel, which you may want to look at, writes about the fruit of the Spirit and how being filled with the Holy Spirit can bring about these certain qualities: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And Christians would say that the Holy Spirit can give you these qualities, can help you to actually exhibit these in day-to-day life. So I think that's something just to really compare and contrast and play around with. Yes, Pentecost had this amazing moments of flamboyancy and rapture and just this overflowing of emotion. But the Holy Spirit for Christians can also bring about qualities that are perhaps more quiet and more reflective, without necessarily having these sort of wild moments. As always, feel free to investigate and chat amongst yourselves. I'm very, very grateful for your views, likes, and of course your subscriptions. But most importantly, thank you for watching, and of course, enjoy your learning.